to Making History in 2020. Good evening and a warm welcome in a very chilly Johannesburg to our Momentum Science of Success for SMEs Masterclass in partnership with Kaya FM. My name is Nozi Poshabalala, and what a pleasure it is to be back with you again in this 4-part series where we're having conversations around how might we give small and medium-sized enterprises the momentum to reset their 2020 2.0. Now, you've seen this beautiful video, and I'm sure you've heard the voices that have been saying that 2020 is cancelled until further notice. We've heard them and we've responded to them, and our response is that does not apply to us. Yes, we know that the environment has changed drastically because of the global pandemic that we all find ourselves in, and more particularly for entrepreneurs, small and medium-sized enterprises specifically are finding themselves having to navigate an environment that has been brought about by changes that have been absolutely unprecedented. And of course, it's for this reason why we see this partnership between Momentum and KFM that is bringing you a masterclass whose purpose is for us to take the stories and the journeys and the experiences of entrepreneurs and extrapolate from those journeys insights and tools and practical information and practical guidance to help us navigate our own businesses. Now, if you were with us last week, you will remember we had a stellar conversation, and our theme last week was all about knowing the new environment, knowing the new regulations, knowing the interventions that had come into the market that we could tap into. This week, we are changing track, and our theme this week and the theme for this masterclass is understanding. And so the conversation that we're going to have with our entrepreneur, who I'm going to introduce shortly, is really going to be about understanding the new normal, understanding this new and emerging environment, understanding what the business needs to be in order to continue to be successful in this environment. And of course, not forgetting understanding the emerging needs of clients as they themselves begin to show different trends around what they want from you, the entrepreneur. Now, our guest is somebody that I have a great deal of respect for. He is the founder of a media company, The Bar Group, and I'm not going to say any more than that because I think his story is absolutely fantastic, and I'm going to allow him to really share some of those nuggets of his story with us. Before Legend Manqele joins us in the conversation, I do want to invite you into the conversation. Now, remember that I've always said that this is a conversation with you and not just to you. So I'm going to be looking forward to your comments, to your questions. You've got the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. So please send me any questions or any comments that you have for Legend, and I will do my level best to try and integrate your voice into this conversation. But it's not just in vain. I'm also going to be keeping my eye out for somebody who's going to really be engaged, who's going to come forward with good quality questions that I'm going to bring into the conversation. There's also a trick to it. I'm going to throw a question at you, and the question is, what is your 2020 2.0? What is your 2020 2.0? And if you can answer me, and I can see an answer that is unique, that stands out, that is really fresh, you could be the winner of the spot prize at the end of this masterclass. It's a business hamper, courtesy of Momentum. So please do participate. We love giving away prizes on these master classes. So you might also know that for those who have continued to be a part of these master classes throughout the webinar series, throughout the 4 weeks, you stand a chance of winning a really special prize for your business. It's a business coach as well as a profiling opportunity in the Kaya stable or ecosystem, so on Kaya FM, on Kaya TV. So stay with us. It's a conversation that you're going to really enjoy over the next 2 to 4 weeks now. Now, if you're going to be participating on social media, because I know a lot of us do, we use multiple screens. The hashtag is success is a science. Success is a science. That's #1. And #2 is, of course, 2020 2.0. This is the language that we are speaking today. Okay, I think I've done a lot of housekeeping. Let me not stand in the way of Legend Manqele. It's such an honor, Legend, to have you with us on our masterclass. Can I ask you to unmute and give us a quick hello?
Hello. Was that quick enough? Hello.
That's a fantastically quick hello. I see we've already got questions coming in. We haven't even started the conversation. So let's start at the beginning, right? Because if one looks at your path into the media industry, into the television industry, it's anything but a straight line. I want to know, where does the initial interest come from? How did you get your foot in the door? And importantly, how do you then rise through the ranks, considering that you don't have, as part of your armory at that time, a post secondary education? So where does this all start?
So, I mean, I think it definitely does begin at home. At home we used to share some amazing stories with each other. I lived in a place called Pietermaritzburg, it's Nating. And, I was a herd boy. We used to go, fetch water from the river. We used to go fetch firewood during these winter times. So it is something that, I also sometimes I'm surprised that, wow, that's where I come from. How did I even know about this industry? I think for me, it definitely does start at home. And just throughout my life, I've been entertained by the most amazing characters and the most amazing stories that people would tell. And I wanted to make sure that, I share that with everyone. Initially, I wanted to be an actor, but I knew that would become the initial thing, and one day I'd be responsible for much more.
So this is incredible. You almost had this a journey sort of mapped up in your head and in your heart, to saying, I'm going to maybe start off with acting, but I'm going to actually this is going to be a stepping stone for something else. I must say, I thought you were punking me. I'm also from Pietermaritzburg, so I had no idea that we're from the same city, right? So I just want to quickly pull up a comment from Nelly, which I think is fantastic. Nelly says, my 2020 2.0 is just a positive attitude. It's about staying motivated and pushing beyond this pandemic. It is a new thing to all of us, but one thing is that it would not stop me from dreaming. So clearly, you and Nelly, dreamers, if you will. So, Legend, you pivot very quickly. So you come into the industry, and then when you start the Bar Leader TV, you make this interesting transition from being an employee to an employer. Tell us a little bit about that transition, and in particular, what are the challenges that you then had to take on in those early days as you now went in and became an entrepreneur rather than the employee of somebody else's organization?
So I think, in the industry, there's a lot to be said about how much lifespan you have. You can be as creative as possible, but the ceiling is quite low, and you end up being frustrated with a lot more than just the normal day-to-day work. So I wanted to be able to sort of promote myself beyond just like producing for someone else. I knew that at some level, these stories weren't as accurate as I wanted them to be. That the trend for content was going in a certain direction, and I wasn't necessarily in the position or in a position to be at the helm of these, I guess, different directions that these companies were supposed to be taking. And I wanted to make sure that I was a part of the storytelling, but at a decision-making level. As producers, yes, we do have, the right to make certain decisions, especially when you're an employee, but it wasn't effective, and it wouldn't change I guess, the industry as I wanted to see it change, you know.
Sure.
So I think that was the main to make sure that, you know, I'm a part of steering this industry in a different way.
So very early on, it sounds like you had your eyes on making an impact in the industry, and that you were not just going to be happy with being a participant in the industry. Now, my next question was going to be about the acquisition of Destiny magazine, but Katlego Sitlo here has literally taken the words out of my mouth. Katlego says, the purchase of Destiny, what motivated that, especially considering that print was said to be dying? That's the question I was going to bring to you, but Katlego was bringing it to you. What was behind that particular acquisition?
It's so early in the conversation. So I wanted to, yeah. So, you know, I think it was born out of just the love of a conversation that I was having at the time with a friend of mine, who's now the editor of the magazine. You know, Onge Dumeko and I used to necessarily just chat about content and chat about certain platforms that existed globally, and chat about some of the things that I think we sort of loved about our industry. And Destiny came up, and she used to work for Ndalo Media. And, you know, she used to tell me about some of the decisions that were being made, and I genuinely was just like enticed by this, you know, by this title and how it came about. I've always been a fan of Kanye Domo, and I think she's been pioneering in that space, and I wanted to essentially just be a contributor and work for them and make sure that they were, you know, I guess also kind of moving into the digital space through video and through other things like roundtables, and I wanted to necessarily infiltrate her space in that way.
Yeah.
Little did I know that I would one day then obviously sit as publisher. But the love for Destiny goes way back. I mean, I used to walk from, I used to walk a lot actually. I used to go to a school called Bisley Park Primary School.
Oh my goodness, and, right? I know Bisley. I have family that walk Bisley, yeah.
Yeah. So I used to walk from Bisley Park to like, there's a neighborhood that we lived in, Ekrenji, and then, or like we'd moved as well from Grange to Westgate. So I used to walk, and we used to pass like this mall that had a CNA, and, you know, Destiny magazine was one of the magazines that I would sort of page through and look at and kind of figure out that, you know, like I really loved this magazine, and I genuinely felt like, you know, it had information that wasn't necessarily available, you know, through the internet at the time, or you know, it was kind of like a novelty to read a story about a Black businessman making waves in their respected industry. So I really loved it for that, and I think the conversation between me and Anke reignited that conversation. So I sort of like, I think it was a serendipitous moment.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean that's why I bought this, you know. But to talk about business and to talk about the reason why in this time, you know, we are in a content era. Content is king. Content takes businesses from A to B, you know, and I think that a brand like that cannot die, but rather it needs to evolve. So, you know, in the early days of this magazine, I've tried to sort of reinstill the brand, but I'm taking it somewhere else now, you know?
That's interesting, because it really speaks to our theme of understanding the evolving needs of content consumption, right? And to say there was a time when Destiny in its print format was the best way of consuming it. And it's interesting to see how you are extending that base, so that on the basis of a new understanding. I've got a quick question here from Lebogang Moshime, which I think is actually a straightforward question, but it's a good question. What inspired the name bar leader in particular and the bar group? I mean, I love the play on words, right? Raising the bar and all of that. But that's also me making assumptions about what was going on in your head at the time. Can you give us a crispy answer to that?
So I was working for a company that produced a lot for Vuzu and for the MultiChoice Group. And I had an opportunity with Kaya FM actually to start providing video for them independently. And I didn't have a company. I didn't know that I needed, like CI and all these things to register the company so that I could invoice Kaya FM. So I found myself in a bit of a weird position, and I had to rush to Santa, and I found this company that sells shelf companies. My intention was never to start, it's born really out of, obviously the first answer that I gave, but at the time it wasn't the correct time. And I bought this company that sounded like Bar Leader, but it wasn't spelled like Bar Leader. And so, and I was just like, actually, like, I like the sound of this, and I could take this sound and make it into the meaning. In fact, it was spelled Bar Leader. And I was just like, actually, Bar Leader needs to be the way, because essentially in anything that I do, in my current state at the time, was to make sure that you set the bar for entertainment, you don't follow it, you don't necessarily look for it, you set it. And that's really, I guess, another serendipitous moment between myself and my ambitions. I found myself sort of like being spoon-fed by the universe, this I guess, mission that would be the Bar Leader,
And how interesting that it's about hearing that the universe speaking to you, but also understanding what the universe is actually trying to say to you to act to that. Siyabonga Vula, I'm seeing your question, which is, okay, Nozi, let's get to how coronavirus impacted the business. I promise you, I am getting there. I just want one more question before we get into the impact of COVID-19. If we take a look at your TV productions, in particular your reality TV productions, they all sort of speak to this, black come-up kid sort of narrative. And many would argue that, Legend is just projecting himself and his story through the stories of others. What I'm interested in is, at what point do you pause and look at everything that you've achieved and say, Mama, I made it. Mama, I'm successful. Is there a moment where you were like, no, I've made it. This is success for me?
I genuinely think, like, it's very difficult to do that. And I've had small achievements, but I haven't had the ultimate achievement, which is personal and which is something that I keep close to my heart, Someone the other day said, you should write a book. And I was like, but I've only got 2 pages in this book, So, and I think a lot of people look at what's outside, a lot of people look at the shell of everything. As business people, as people who are creative in this industry, it is still quite difficult. It is still quite a challenge to exist, Just because I've got a #1 show doesn't mean that I've got a #1 bank account. Doesn't mean that I've got, like first option for these shows. It's really still something that I am trying to change in the industry. That when you do well, it shouldn't necessarily reflect in all areas. And so that's part of the journey. I think that I'm still working on. I have achieved quite a lot. It seems. And I have taken in those moments, but I don't think I'm quite there.
Not quite there yet. So loving the humility coming through, but again, that long-term play, consistent in your story. Now, Sibusiso, I'm getting to your question, but I'm going to do it with a little bit of trick. I'm going to ask our participants to participate in a poll by answering a question for me. So what I'm going to ask is I'm going to ask our technical team to launch a poll for me. So you should be able to see a poll popping up on your screen right about now. There we go. And there you have it. So here's the simple question. before I come to Legend to find out how his business has been impacted by COVID-19, I want to know, how has your business been impacted by COVID-19? Could it be that your business has received a boost as a result of the pandemic and you're actually doing much more work than before? Could it be that there's just been a really minimal impact on your business? Could it be that your business is in a financial crisis as a result of cash flow or other reasons, and you're actually going to have to close down in the next few weeks or months without a continuity plan? Or could it be that you've had to close your business down already as a result of the pandemic? Now, the beautiful thing is I can see the number of people that have responded. So I'm going to allow this poll to run for another 20 seconds to get everybody an opportunity to get their votes in. But it's interesting because as I'm looking at the results on my end, is to see that a large majority, as of now, are saying there's been minimal impact on their businesses. All right, so let's give it 10 more seconds. Thank you very much. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to end this poll. I'm going to close the poll. And as I end the poll, I'm going to see the results of that particular poll. So let me tell you what these results are saying. 17% of us on this masterclass have seen a boost in business. Almost half, 46% are saying, well, Nozi, Legend, it's actually really been a minimal impact to the business. 34% are saying, no, there's been a real impact. We don't have a plan. Things could really go south. We're under a cash crunch. And only 3% say they've had to close their business down as a result of the pandemic. Thank you very much for participating and for giving us that insight. So I bring the question to you then, Legend. And I want to start off with maybe just your thoughts on, how do you, from your observation, how did COVID-19 impact the media industry? What were some of the shockwaves that you observed?
I mean, as a whole, like we saw what was happening globally, and I don't think it sunk in for most businesses in South Africa in the media industry. I've seen some production houses close, even broadcasters themselves weren't ready. So you saw certain soaps, go on a production break without any episodes in the bank. So a lot has been happening, and I think for me, it couldn't have happened at the worst time. It was in March. We were expecting our new contracts. Our year end had necessarily been finalized. We had pitched. We were ready. To speak specifically, I mean, I'd had potentially the biggest contract with South African tourism that was awarded but hadn't been signed. So here I am thinking, my business is going to move. We're going to be the most amazing thing. We're going to be creating content for the rest of the world. And the collaboration that was up for grabs there was with Joe Public. So me and Joe Public were going to come together and be this most amazing content, like producers that the world has seen. And I think we got very, very excited. And shortly after, because South African tourism uses state funds, that kind of money was no longer available. So sure. Tourism was also closed. So that industry impacted our industry, and we couldn't necessarily perform. And I had necessarily prepared, a lot of work around this stuff. So I'd moved certain productions down, I'd moved certain things down, and the things that I'd moved, it was too late to sort of move back into place. So a lot happened, and I felt, like we needed to react, and we needed to react quickly. I've never been called to lead like that in my life, where you're planning people's livelihoods, and you have yourself, your family, and the business to think of, because you don't know whether it is 21 days. You've seen, what the rest of the news outlets have said around America, and these are first world countries. So you actually cannot prepare for 21 days. You need to prepare for at least 3 months. But here we are, 3 months down the line, and we're still are experiencing this thing. And so there've been a lot of, moments where I felt like I've never experienced this type of thing. So how do I lead here? Cash flow has been a problem. People demanding their invoices to be paid now, but you're also depending on invoices coming in. So it's just been a bit of a mess. And the type of interaction from where I stand in the expectation of our suppliers and our people that we work with has been almost like new to me, because it's like you need to communicate on the hour and you need to communicate immediately. And I've failed at that, and I've tried to pick myself up at that. You realize that actually in this moment you're alone and you have to walk this mile alone. So it's been very difficult. I've wished for a business partner, and I've wished for my maker to come down and save me. It's been very
So you've just shared some really incredible insights here. There's a thread here around how have you had to re-understand yourself as a leader of a business. You've spoken about even having to re-understand forecasting for your business and your cycles and how you frame things. And I think this is really, really incredible. So there are a couple of questions here that I really speak to the themes that you've just raised. So Nelly's touching on the people theme, and you were talking about the responsibility that you have towards your team. And Nelly's asking, how did you make your employees understand? How did you help them stay positive? And how did you make them understand the reality that, there might be some implications for what is happening in the industry? And I want to just merge this with a question from Charlotte, who says, what's your coping strategy? So how do you cope? And so essentially, I'm going to take the questions together and I want to rephrase it and say, when you think about the people within your business, including yourself, how did your team deal with this new reality and this new normal that they suddenly had to engage with? And I love the question from Lebogang, who says, what has COVID-19 taught you about yourself? So how did you cope? How did your team take it? And what have you learned about yourself?
So what I did immediately was I didn't wait for the president to announce a lockdown or for people to stay at home. I initially called for our lockdown to be 2 weeks before anything like that happened. So we were out of the office 2 weeks before, so that we could prepare home-like offices, little hybrid offices that could run in people's homes. We could set up internet accordingly because our business had been digital. It just was running digitally in the office, but not in people's homes. So we reacted quickly and we were ahead of that curve. But what hit me was, oh snap, like actually I need to be able to touch base with everyone. I need to be able to be available now to individuals rather than, because we have different departments as well. Like not everyone meets at the same time. So a Zoom call is no longer like, it's firstly, yes, a tool to use, but how do you use it during the day? Because you've still got phone calls, you've still got all these things. So I needed to understand how to communicate to everyone efficiently and sufficiently, and to also keep a pulse on how much work we were training out during this time. I also needed to make sure that the client was aware that we were actually working from home and that they needed to be sensitive towards that. And we needed to be sensitive towards that. So attaching ourselves to that message was key. So I sent out a huge email to all our clients to say, listen, this is what we're doing. We are working from home. So during this time, we are trying to find this new normal, but we will, in no time. And we did that. And then it was time to communicate to the team to say, hey, this is what we need to do. These are our goals during this time. And, we've seen everybody around the world sort of lose their jobs. I'm not saying don't expect, I'm saying just bear with me during this time, and I need us to sort of communicate and work together. You need to ask for help. You need to ask what you need to do during this time as well, in as much as I need to reach out to you guys. So it needs to be a conversation that comes from you in as much as the conversation comes from my side. You are working at home, but you are still on my time. So I needed to establish those relationships and establish that new normal with the team, and everybody was quite supportive. And initially it was quite like welcome, like thank you very much. This is actually quite good. And then 21 days started going. It was just like, yo, like, okay, how are we going to do this?
Yeah.
This is crazy. The announcement of a further lockdown measures was then introduced to us. I then started getting scared because in the 21 days, it wasn't as smooth. There were so many drop balls, communication issues, there were network Wi-Fi issues, and it was really difficult, right? And I think everyone was experiencing that. It wasn't just to my industry, but also, the big corporate that we supply with content wasn't also ready for it. So, as you know, big companies take time to turn.
Yeah.
We had turned the tide quite quickly. For them, they were still trying to put in place. So there was a bit of like lag from their side. And, for us, that was quite frustrating because it meant that work not delivered or work not signed off wasn't going to be paid for. So invoices were late. Now I needed to actually start chatting to banks, start chatting to everyone to say, look, I've got reserves, but this is as far as I go. I think that this thing is going to go 3 months. So I then sent out communication. Actually, I spoke to a lot of businesses, a lot of peers, a lot of people outside my industry, a lot of mentor-like figures that were also reacting. And I sort of collected information that would give me an average on how I needed to act. And I sent out an email to say, guys, I've got until May. I've got until May on my personal capacity. What I want you to know is that, like, I'm not a bank, but what I am is somebody who needs to step up and show my part of like, for my efforts or whatever. So I'm going to reach where I've never reached before. And I did. 3 months down the line, I had to sit with certain members of the team to start chatting about how maybe we could pause this role, maybe we could start relooking at how we do certain things, and maybe come back to normal after 3 months. But I've had to sort of pause certain roles in the company with a non-exclusive trade. So if they do find other work, they can, go secure themselves elsewhere. But I've had to have that conversation. I haven't let go yet, but I do think that, if this carries on, it will come a time I need to let go. Yeah.
Sure. So I love the authenticity of your responses, and in particular, just this narration of this constant conversation that is happening between you and your team, and the extension of self to others, so that conversation continues. I do want to pick up on a point that you raised, and I think it's quite interesting. I mean, you spoke about the size of some of your clients and how for them turning the ship we know is so much harder. We know agility is hard when you're a big corporate, and so much easier if you are leaner. And I guess my question to you is, do you see this becoming an advantage and a differentiator in the future? And does it give you almost a reinforcement that lean is better than big in this new normal, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think big is good, but I think lean is better, because what we've been able to do is lead the big corporates. What we've been able to do, I think that's been the positive, to be very honest, is that we've been able to be a good beacon to say, well, this is a system that we can all use, like, in the meantime. Or these are the type, and I produce shows, so I've had to innovate around some of the technology in order to provide content for them. Like, whether it was these types of formats where people are on Zoom and interviewing each other, whether it was, as you've seen, the lockdown Channel O, live performances or whatever it is. But essentially, we've had to innovate around COVID-friendly content. And they didn't come up with that. We came up with those strategies. Yes, to keep us afloat, but to keep them afloat as well. You know, so it's been quite an interesting time. We've led the big companies, but they're now sort of coming back and saying, actually, this is working. This is what we'll do. You know.
That's fantastic because, I mean, it really then creates the opportunity to have a conversation around almost new trends that are underlying how clients are consuming content and how consumers in general are consuming content, and whether there is a new normal in terms of what that landscape looks like in particular. And that's the question I really want to bring to you, is that are you seeing new behavioral trends around the consumption of content, and what do we need to understand about this new landscape, especially if you are a business that is in the media space?
I think, you know, now is for me more what I've learned is a lot of people are looking for content that serves them. So whether it's on the small screen, whether it's mobile, whether it's OTT, whether it's traditional broadcast, what people are looking for now, because, you know, you've experienced, obviously, I think the country's gone through mental health issues, mental this and that. It can't just be this one type of content. What I found is that, yes, the technology now has allowed us to sort of serve the clients in different ways, right? But what for me is at the center of that serving is your content meaningful? Can it change the way I look at life as we need to change during this time? Does it serve me beyond just making me laugh, or does it serve me beyond that hour of viewing? So I found that, you know, there now is more of a call for a balanced type of content on the various platforms. So during this time, we launched the AKA TV app, which, you know, was focused and served his audience. And so there is as well like this focused thing when it comes to consumers. Now they're saying, no, I want my viewing to be this way, and it has to be personal, it has to be about the person that I choose to follow. So you're going to see a lot of that happen. People come up with their own platforms and start having their own little tribes around the country, you know. Whereas I think as well, you know, whilst everyone has been forced to go digital, TV has actually been on the rise, in the sense that families are now sitting together and they want to see, a program together. So it's been quite a confusing time, but I think it's been quite fruitful in the sense that there's been more opportunity now to create on a wider area rather than this one focused thing, you know?
That's incredible. I mean, that's a trend that I think I haven't heard before, this idea that because there's greater community, because there's greater connection, because families are spending time together, what we once thought was obsolete, the television set, suddenly isn't. And we're actually seeing even more screens coming our way. I do want to start transitioning our conversation to start thinking about the future and to start talking about some of your plans. But I do want to lift this really beautiful response. Makawe Klaba says, this isn't a question, Nozi. It's what you asked about the 2020 2.0. And Makawe says, J.K. Rowling once said that rock bottom became the solid foundation in which she built her life. That's what COVID has done for many of us. And so moving forward, the solution is to innovation, constantly thinking about innovation. COVID today is an innovated world tomorrow. I don't know if you're not tweeting that, or if it's not going up on a banner somewhere. I don't know what you're doing with your 2020. We just need to screen.
I am going to take that. I am taking that with me. To be very honest, that's a beautiful. How is it? I think, I'm going to take that. I'm really taking that. Yeah, I think she's right. I think he or she is right.
No, I think so too. I think it's such a beautiful contribution. Now, one of the questions that came up earlier was this idea of what have you learned about yourself as a leader? And I want to link it to this idea of, in order to see what Makawe is challenging us to do, to see the opportunity in the challenge, in order to see the window of opportunity through the crisis, it requires a particular type of mindset. It's either you have that mindset or you don't. And I'm interested in tapping into, what is the mindset you had to be consciously, almost wearing every morning to say, okay, this is my armor that I'm taking with me into the office today, even if the office meant going into your lounge.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me has been to be kind to myself. Like, I know that this isn't something that I've done to the company or a decision that I've made personally to some of the things that we've had to endure. So, I've had to know that. But what I know for sure is that I was never ready for this. As a leader, I was never prepared for this. Watching all the news outlets report on it could have never made me ready for this. I don't actually know what could have made me ready for this. I know that, at some level, like, I need to stop feeling guilty for some of the mistakes that happened during this time. And I genuinely, I know that I'm proud of myself now, having still, like, being in the opportunity of still running this company, being in the opportunity of holding on to the steering wheel without losing my mind, because essentially it's been very tough. I'm a creative. I genuinely lean more on the creative side than the business side, and so I had to be innovative around myself and how I keep sane and how I stay above the water. And then also make sure that, when I go downstairs to my office, I am able to be well enough for the next person, for the clients, and for the team. So, I do think that everybody who's held on, everybody who has been defeated during this time, they need to know that it's not their fault. I now know that. And it took having a conversation with another business leader to tell me that actually it's not your fault. Like, wait on it. Hold on. There's a brighter day after this. Make sure that you research about other pandemics and know that, this has happened before. This is just a different form. And what happens after this is that there's going to be great opportunity. So look forward to that. I know that I was very hard on myself in the beginning because there are some drop balls that I still, when I think about today, I just go, like, why? But now I know, actually, hold on, you did well, you're going to do well. And after this, it's going to be a brilliant, yeah?
And I suppose, checking in to your own mental state is so important, because you cannot be a safe place, a psychologically safe space, and you cannot be an anchor for your clients, for your employees, if you're not feeling grounded yourself, and if you're not feeling anchored yourself. And so, part of this conversation is about understanding what's happening within yourself as an entrepreneur, so that you can calibrate and be able to be what you need to be for the people that you serve, because essentially you are in service of your clients. Now, I've got Ratiba Mohale has sent me the same question, I think 7 times. Ratiba, it doesn't work like that. You have to ask one question and then I will get to the answer. But because you've asked the question 7 times, I'm going to put the question to Legend. Ratiba wants to know, are you ever going back to the office, or is a long-term plan that you will continue working from home? But before you answer, there was a question earlier, and I do apologize if I've now lost your name, but I remember the question. The question is, if this lasts for another 2 years, what are some of the hard structural changes that you're going to have to make in your business? So there's a short-term question around, are you looking to head back to the office? So when are you going to say, this is the green light, we're on our way? But there's a long-term question as well, which is, and what if we're not even halfway through this crisis? What are the big changes you're going to have to make?
So first of all, I actually just had a conversation with my landlord, and landlords are one of the toughest people to sort of please and to sort of like work with, because they too are running a business. I had to tell him, I don't think I'm coming back. I think I'll carry on, or maybe, in fact, tomorrow I've got like viewing for, these WeShare offices or these, sharing, co-working spaces. So I'm looking at that. I think that industry is about to boom because all you need really is a boardroom, great connection, and for a few team members to have access to that office. So I think that for me is a solution now moving forward. Time will tell. I think what determines our long term is how our clients sort of brief us according to what they want in terms of our services. But because I've got my own platform like a Destiny magazine, we can do that at home. We've got a lot of freelancers that sort of contribute to the magazine and the website. So we're kind of COVID ready, for this to last for the next 2 years. But it does depend on what the traditional broadcasters want us to do. We're delivering remotely as it stands, so we're not necessarily bringing a tape or walking in with a hard drive. Now we're sort of like, we're sharing on the cloud. We don't even meet each other. I haven't seen these people in about 3 months. I kind of miss them.
You can't believe.
So I am a bit. But essentially, I think for an artist and for creatives, it is kind of difficult not to have that human interaction. What makes us creative is normal day-to-day type interactions. A jog, a walk, something at the supermarket, interactions in the office, kind of bring about what you see in traditional TV, a broadcasting sense. So for us, I have to now sort of find a different source for that creativity.
Yeah.
I have to find, and maybe this we wait in anticipation because part of my company's fabric is to really try emulate what's happening in and around you so that it stays relevant and so maybe we might need to predict the future, but I do think that we're prepared for 2 years. We're prepared, but it all depends on what the client wants and how they want.
That's lovely. It's really, it's saying we're alive to the situation. We're agile enough to change, and we're open to new understanding of what is required of us at all times. I do want to share one more comment from Ratiba. Ratiba didn't send this 8 times, but it's worth noting. Says he is a great leader. Please thank him and acknowledge him for us. Charlotte says, thank you for saying that you forgive yourself for the mistakes that you've made in this time. As human beings, we are all dealing with so much newness, and we need to hear this every so often. So, Charlotte really stepping into some of the emotive language that you've been speaking about. Utulsile just wants to know what's up in terms of new content and what to look forward to. Tulsila, we're going to get to that question in a second. But I also wanted to bring in a couple of other comments that have been really fantastic. Lots of big ups to you, Legend, around comments from our participants saying that your content is meaningful, that you are producing content that serves. That's Lebohang Moshime as well. And lots of others saying you're doing such a great job. Sepati Makote says, what a great, authentic conversation, Legend. You are an absolute leader. And Sepati was asking the question around what's the biggest change that this pandemic has presented in your business. And so we've picked up on that. I think we've touched on that particular question. Now, there is a question before I get to my last 2 questions from Nelly. And Nelly is saying, Legend, do you think that our government understands our struggles as SMEs? And do you think that government is doing enough to help us in this time?
So the government has done the most it has during this time that I've ever seen, to be very honest. There's innovation, there's, I've been having conversations with some of my industry leaders around what the government has done or tried to do during this time for our industry. So I think they have tried, but I think, they've been caught off guard. And I think, to be very honest, moving forward, we need a lot more of them to do their job. I've got friends who work in government, and never have I ever seen them so like stressed and with their backs against the wall. Like it is genuinely I've been saying, if you look at like globally, like leaders have been speaking to the country every day. And luckily now we'll hear the president at 8 o'clock, but we need communication. Businesses haven't been communicated to in time to make the necessary changes. Some of the things could have been avoided, but we sit here and we say to ourselves, okay, tomorrow's a better day, but to be very honest, it isn't without leadership. So when I say to myself, I've been called to be a leader that I never thought I was, or I never thought I could be, is because there's demand every day. I've had to even beg some of the stuff to say, these guys, can I just have an hour to respond to you guys? I need time to think. But I do also understand on the other hand that this is a big country, and a lot of people need to plan and need to be meticulous when they communicate to us. But the gaps have been too long. The gaps have been too big for me as a business leader. I think at a very big level, I've been failed, and in the industry, when it comes to like our leaders in government, I think that there needs to be more understanding about industries that you lead as ministers. So some of the decisions, like, let me give you an example. We were told, we can now, as production houses, go film. But does it apply to actors? Does it apply to caterers? Because our industry kind of touches on a lot more than just our industry. So we involve caterers, we involve drivers, we involve so many other people. We're not just people who shoot or act. There's so many other things around us. So, and sort of like these relief funds, like, some of us we're still largely a blue collar industry. So, we get freelancers who don't necessarily qualify for UIF and all these other things. Yeah. So how do you better that? How do you, we've been calling for royalties. At a time like this, royalties mean a lot. And we were found wanting as an industry. So I think, it's called on me to also hold them accountable in a very big way. As a young person in this industry, our future definitely looks bleak. And that's why I think there's still 2 pages in the book, and there's definitely a lot of work to do. I don't feel achieved. I don't feel achieved at all. We need to work harder, and we need to be more prepared. There have been pandemics before, and I think it worsens when we have a government that isn't ready, that isn't communicating, that isn't leading. I think Cyril has done well, his immediate team has done well, but we've seen a lot of drop balls that have caused a lot of businesses, a lot of heartache, and a lot of, failure, essentially,
Yeah, so very frank answer, some hard stances there and hard lines that you're taking. So let's just take a couple of steps back and we begin to look to the future now, Legend, as we begin to near our wrap. How do you see the industry, the media industry looking like? I mean, there's so many changes that we are alive to right now. Do you think that the industry is going to look fundamentally different in a post-COVID world?
I think it's already starting to change. If you look at all the publishing houses that we saw closed down during this time, if you look at some of the I guess the news outlets that we have as a country, they were reporting false. They were clearly, they clearly had agendas, and we saw some of, our people independently push them back, which meant that we weren't in a secure position as people who communicate and who are communicated to. We need to build the media industry. We need to make sure that something other than the government itself holds, accountable for its people. Journalism is quite important. For a progressive country, we need media. And we need media that isn't necessarily biased to certain things, that isn't necessarily seen to be favoring. We need a non-biased or non-partisan type of structure in our industry. And I think for me, if we carry on this way, we will lose the battle. Government needs to be held accountable, businesses need to be held accountable, and people need a voice other than just the people that they voted for. We need to be able to build. Newspapers cannot die. Media outlets cannot die. You know, we are the mirror to society, and if there is no mirror, we're definitely going to find ourselves in a lot of trouble as a country.
Sure. So media as the mirror to society that we actually cannot afford to let shatter. Such beautiful, powerful words. Final question. You've been quoted as you're almost talking about 2020 as a year that is of a significant milestone for your business. It's the year of maturity in terms of your business, potentially with deals and acquisitions in the pipeline. And a lot has happened in this year. And I suppose my question then becomes, what's your 2020 2.0? You know, how are you still going to make this year count despite everything that has happened?
I think it's taking advantage of I guess it's going to sound cunning, but the blind, you know, really stepping up and leading and taking up the challenge. No matter how hard it is, I think for me, I put myself in a position to try lead my clients where they didn't know where to go, to try help others. And I think it will play a very big role in the near future, because I think those who stepped up, those who helped, those who made sure that they were selfless during this time will, I guess, you know, reap the rewards soon enough, you know. So my 2.0 is to step in to help and to lead and to make sure that, you know, Legend steps back and the leader sort of steps forward. And I think, you know, we need to stay true to what the company is called. We need to set the bar and lead it at the same time. So I want to be that guy during this time. And I think at some level, you know, I've had the opportunity of doing that.
It's Legend Manqele. He wants to set the bar, and he wants the leader in him to step up and continue to lead. Now, this has been an absolutely exceptional conversation. I cannot thank you enough. Before we close off, I do want to turn our attention to a very special video that we'd like to share with our participants. And for those of you with us last week, you know this is the time where I go and I quickly consult to get a sense of who is getting that spot prize, who has been really, really participating, engaging, asking questions, responding to what's your 2020 2.0. So let's play that video while I go and confer with some of my judges behind the scenes.
We're going to love each other much more. I'm going to give these guys my support. I'm
going to be so loud. The whole world's going to hear.
About how many likes I get, and just like myself,
I'm going to give nature like a big hug.
I'm not going to be scared anymore.
give him the world he deserves.
I want him to be with his friends.
And there you absolutely have it. If you could restart 2020, what would you do differently? Hopefully this is a question that is going to be seated in your heart and that you're going to take with you even as we close off this particular masterclass. I want to say a really big thank you to Legend for really showing up so authentically and so amazingly in the conversation. We appreciate you so much. A big thank you to you who tuned into this masterclass. You could have been doing anything else. It's a really, really cold day or night wherever you are in South Africa, and yet you chose to be with us. We are grateful for you. Now, remember, as always, we always send you a digital pack takeaway. In this particular instance, we're going to be sending you the link to this conversation so you can always go back and lift some of those insights and the tools and the practical information and guidance that we were able to extrapolate out of Legend's story. And remember, do stay tuned next week, same time, Wednesday, 7 p.m., where we're going to be moving into our third theme. And our third theme is adjusting. So we've moved from knowing to understanding, which is today. And next week, I'm going to have another entrepreneur who, through their story, is going to talk to us about how do we adjust to the environmental changes and ensure that we are setting up our businesses for success. Don't forget the big prize at the end of the webinar series. You could get a business coach, and of course, you could get an opportunity to profile your business, which is a fantastic, fantastic opportunity. Remember, this conversation continues on social media. Success is a science, hashtag success is a science. You can also use hashtag momentum shift. Hashtag momentum shift. From myself, Nozipho Shabalala, what an awesome pleasure for me to be your host tonight and host you again for another 2 masterclasses. Thank you to Momentum and a big thank you to Kai FM. Thank you for having us. It's goodbye.